Families don't always fall apart with shouting matches or slammed doors. Sometimes they shatter quietly around a perfectly set table, with roasted turkey in the center and forced smiles stretched too thin. Thanksgiving was supposed to be about gratitude, about warmth, about belonging. I wore my favorite sweater that night, the one my mother once said made me look safe. I arrived early, helped in the kitchen, laughed at the same old jokes I'd been laughing at my entire life. And still something felt wrong. The room was colder than usual. Conversations stopped when I walked in. My sister avoided my eyes, her smile sharp, rehearsed. My parents moved around me like I was already a ghost, present, but inconvenient. I told myself I was imagining it. I always did. Dinner was served. Plates were filled. Glasses were raised. That's when my sister stood up. She didn't look angry. She looked prepared. Her voice was calm, confident, almost kind. "We voted," she said, tapping her glass softly. "And we've decided you're not family anymore." For a moment, I didn't understand the words. Voted? Family? Not anymore? I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my mind refused to accept the cruelty of it. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to correct her. No one did. My mother stared at her plate. My father cleared his throat. The people who had known me my entire life said nothing. Silence became their answer. That was the moment I learned something devastating. You can love people endlessly and still be disposable to them. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood up slowly, hands shaking, heart breaking in ways I didn't know were possible. As I walked out of that house, the door closing behind me felt less like rejection and more like release. They thought they had erased me. What they didn't know was this. They had just voted me into a life where I would no longer beg for a seat at anyone's table. And that life was going to change everything. I didn't leave the house immediately after my sister's words landed on the table like a verdict. For a few seconds, my body refused to move. I stood there, fingers curled around the back of my chair, listening to the faint clink of silverware, the hum of the heater, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding so loudly it felt like everyone must hear it. No one spoke. That silence hurt more than the sentence itself. My sister sat back down, satisfied, as if she had just announced dessert instead of my exile. She avoided looking at me now, not because she felt guilty, but because she didn't need to look anymore. The damage was done. I searched the room desperately for a lifeline. My mother. She had always been the soft one, the peacemaker, the woman who kissed scraped knees and whispered, "Family sticks together." "Mom," I said quietly. My voice cracked on the single word. She didn't look up. She adjusted her napkin instead. That was when something inside me collapsed. My father cleared his throat, the way he always did when uncomfortable. "Ellie," he began, then stopped, as if he couldn't decide whether I was worth finishing the sentence. "We just think," my sister added smoothly, "that it's better this way. For everyone. Everyone. Except me." I felt heat rise to my face, humiliation mixed with disbelief. My mind raced, searching for what crime I had committed that deserved a vote. Had I stolen? Lied? Betrayed them? No. I had simply outgrown the role they assigned me. The quiet one, the accommodating one, the one who always gave and never asked. I picked up my coat slowly. No one stopped me. As I walked toward the door, I realized something terrifying. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were relieved. The cold air outside hit my skin like punishment. My breath came out in shaky clouds as I stood on the porch, keys trembling in my hand. I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove without knowing where I was going, headlights blurring as tears finally spilled over. I pulled over a few blocks away and sat there, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, gasping like I'd been underwater too long. How does a family vote someone out? When had my existence become a debate? I thought back, and suddenly, everything made sense. The comments disguised as jokes, the exclusion masked as accidents. The way my sister's smile tightened whenever I succeeded. She had always competed with me, not openly, quietly. I was the younger one who did well without trying, the one teachers praised, the one people naturally liked. And my sister, older, louder, hungrier for validation, had spent years collecting resentment like ammunition. This vote wasn't spontaneous. It was strategy. That night, I slept in my car, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I couldn't bring myself to knock on anyone's door and explain that my family had decided I didn't belong. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "We hope you understand. This wasn't easy." I stared at the screen, numb. They had voted, unanimously, and now they wanted me to understand. I didn't reply. I turned my phone off. That was the first choice I made for myself in years. Over the next few days, the shock settled into something heavier. Grief. Not for the people they were, but for the family I thought I had. I replayed every memory, wondering which ones were real and which were conditional. How many hugs had come with unspoken resentment? How many smiles had been forced? I moved into a small studio apartment across town. Bare walls, a mattress on the floor. Silence, so loud it rang in my ears. But in that silence, something unexpected happened. I could breathe. No one judged what I ate. No one questioned my choices. No one measured my worth against theirs. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking to fit. I was alone, but I wasn't invisible. One evening, as I unpacked a single box of clothes, my phone lit up again. A message from my sister this time. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We just think you're different now." Different. I laughed bitterly. Different meant stronger. Different meant independent. Different meant uncontrollable. And they hated that. I typed back only 3 words. "I choose myself." Then I blocked her. That night, lying on the mattress, staring at the ceiling, I made myself a promise. I would never beg for belonging again. If love had conditions, I didn't want it. They thought they had erased me. They had no idea they had just lit the fire that would change everything. The first thing no one tells you about being cut off from your family is this: the world doesn't stop. Bills still arrive. People still laugh in cafes. The sun still rises, indifferent to your heartbreak. But you change. I woke up every morning in my studio apartment with a strange sense of disorientation, like I was living someone else's life. The silence pressed against my ears, thick and constant. No morning texts. No passive-aggressive reminders. No expectations. I told myself this was freedom. Some days I believed it. Other days, I sat on the edge of my mattress, staring at the floor, wondering how people who once loved you could erase you so easily. I went back to work a week later. My coworkers noticed immediately. "You okay?" someone asked gently. I smiled. I had perfected that smile years ago. Just tired. What I didn't say was that my chest felt hollow, like something vital had been scooped out and replaced with quiet determination. At lunch, I sat alone and watched people scroll through photos of family dinners, group chats buzzing with inside jokes. I didn't envy them. I studied them. I wanted to understand something fundamental. Why some people protected their own, and others destroyed them. That question followed me everywhere. At night, I replayed the Thanksgiving scene over and over, but now my focus shifted. I wasn't frozen in shock anymore. I noticed details I had missed before. My sister's calm confidence. My father's silence. My mother's avoidance. It wasn't chaos. It was coordination. And that realization hurt worse than the rejection itself. They hadn't reacted emotionally. They had planned. The grief slowly hardened into something sharper. Clarity. I started writing everything down, conversations, dates, small moments that suddenly made sense. My sister suggesting I take a break from family events. My parents asking invasive questions about my finances. The subtle way they'd pulled back support once I became more independent. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of not controlling me. One evening, as rain streaked down my window, I received an email from a lawyer. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, until I saw the sender's name. My father's attorney. My heart dropped. The email was formal, cold, efficient. It explained that certain family assets I had once been promised would no longer be allocated to me. Trust funds adjusted. Beneficiary names revised. They weren't just erasing me emotionally. They were cutting me off financially. I sat there, staring at the screen, waiting for the pain to hit. It didn't. Instead, something unexpected happened. I felt calm. They had made their move. Now I understood the game. I closed my laptop and laughed. A quiet, humorless sound. They thought I needed them. They had no idea how wrong they were. The next day, I asked for a meeting at work. I had always been reliable, invisible, the one who did more than required and asked for nothing in return. Not anymore. I want more responsibility, I told my manager. And I'm ready for it. She looked surprised, then impressed. Within weeks, I was leading a project I had never been trusted with before. My ideas were sharp. My focus unbreakable. Pain, it turns out, is an incredible motivator. I worked late, learned fast, spoke up, and people listened. For the first time, my voice didn't tremble when I claimed space. One night, after another long day, I stopped at a small cafe near my apartment. The barista smiled warmly, handed me my coffee, and said, "Rough day." I hesitated, then nodded. "Same," he said softly. "But you look like someone who doesn't quit." I didn't know why those words stayed with me. Maybe because no one in my family had ever said them. As weeks turned into months, the loneliness changed shape. It wasn't constant anymore. It came in waves, holidays, birthdays, random memories triggered by songs or smells. But something else grew alongside it. Strength. I stopped checking my phone for messages that would never come. I stopped rehearsing imaginary conversations where they apologized. I accepted the truth. They weren't going to save me. So, I would save myself. One evening, I received a notification. My sister had viewed my LinkedIn profile. I smiled. Of course she had. Curiosity always follows confidence. I imagined her scrolling through my accomplishments, her carefully built narrative cracking just a little. Good. Let it crack. Because this was only the beginning. They had voted me out of the family. What they didn't realize was that they had freed me from playing small. And somewhere ahead, beyond the silence, beyond the grief, something else was waiting. Not just revenge, not just success, but love. The kind that doesn't require permission. There's a strange moment that comes after betrayal. Not the crying, not the anger, but the moment when you realize you're no longer afraid. That moment came to me on an ordinary Tuesday. I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room, sunlight spilling across the table, when my manager slid a folder toward me. "We want you to lead the expansion project," she said. For a second, I just stared at her. This project had always gone to people with connections, last names that mattered, people who came from families like mine, or the family I used to have. "You're ready," she added. "And frankly, you're the smartest person in the room." I felt something loosen inside my chest. All my life, I had been the background, the dependable one, the one who didn't rock the boat. But now, I was done being invisible. I said yes. That night, I walked home instead of taking a cab. The city felt different, brighter, louder, alive. Neon lights reflected off wet pavement. People hurried past me, chasing dreams, disasters, second chances. For the first time, I felt like one of them. Not someone waiting to be chosen. Someone choosing herself. The changes didn't happen overnight. They happened quietly. I upgraded my wardrobe, not flashy, just confident. Structured coats, clean lines, clothes that said I know who I am. I stopped apologizing before speaking. I stopped explaining myself to people who weren't listening. And slowly, people noticed. At work, my name started coming up in rooms I wasn't invited to yet. Emails CC'd, meetings extended, respect earned. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. I was reviewing documents late when someone knocked on my office door. "Still alive in here?" I looked up. He was tall, calm, dressed simply, confidence without arrogance. His eyes held amusement, but also something else. Depth. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Legal consultant. You've been keeping my team busy." I smiled faintly. "That's my job."
He laughed.
Not loud.
Real.
Fair enough. We talked, first about work, then about nothing important at all. Coffee preferences, bad office snacks, the strange comfort of late nights when the world is quieter. He didn't ask about my family, and for the first time, I was grateful. A week later, I saw my sister's name again. Not on social media, in a contract. Her husband's company was bidding on a partnership tied directly to my project. I stared at the screen, heart steady. This wasn't fate. This was irony. She had voted me out of the family.
But now?
She was unknowingly standing in my professional shadow. I told no one.
Not yet.
I reviewed the proposal carefully, professionally,
Objectively.
and found flaws. Serious ones. Numbers that didn't add up. Claims without evidence. Overconfidence where precision was required. The decision went to the executive committee. They rejected the bid.
Cleanly.
Legally. Irreversibly. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my sister.
Hey.
Long time. Can we talk? I stared at it. Months ago, that message would have shattered me. Now, it felt late.
I didn't reply.
Power isn't loud. Sometimes it's silence. Daniel and I started having coffee more often. Then dinners. Nothing rushed. Nothing heavy. One night, he looked at me thoughtfully and said, "You've been through something." I didn't deny it. "You don't flinch when things get hard," he continued. "That usually comes from surviving something or someone." I met his gaze. "Both," I said quietly. He nodded like he understood. And maybe he did. Because some people don't need explanations. They recognize strength because they've earned their own. The holidays came again. This time, I wasn't dreading them. I booked a solo trip. A small cabin.
Snow. Silence.
On Christmas morning, I woke up alone and at peace. No table where I wasn't welcome. No family vote. No performance. Just me and a future I was finally building. Back in the city, I received an invitation. A corporate gala.
High profile. Public.
And on the guest list, my sister. My parents. I stared at the invitation for a long time. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was alignment. They had cast me out. Now they were about to see who I became without them. And this time, I wouldn't be asking for my place back. I'd be standing where they could no longer ignore me. The gala was everything my family had loved. Grand chandeliers, polished marble floors, and the smell of expensive perfume that masked ambition and envy. I arrived alone. No one to vouch for me. No one to make me feel small. Just me, tall, composed, and entirely visible. The floor-length black gown fit perfectly. Sleek hair, subtle makeup. I walked in with confidence that had been forged in months of isolation, hardship, and silent victories. I could feel eyes on me immediately, not all approving, some curious, some calculating, and yes, some guilty. My parents, my sister. They had dressed carefully, trying to assert elegance, but their faces betrayed something I had learned to recognize over countless dinners: anxiety. I smiled politely at acquaintances and colleagues, knowing that in a room like this, perception is everything. And perception now was mine. Daniel was waiting at the entrance, tall and relaxed, looking at me like I was the only person in the room that mattered. "You clean up nicely," he said with a grin. I laughed. "Thank you. You're not bad yourself." We walked inside together. Nothing romantic overtly, but everything meaningful. Mutual respect, mutual understanding. Trust building silently in a way people who've survived recognize strength in each other. The moment I saw my sister, the tension became palpable. She noticed me immediately. Not my presence, my power. I caught her staring, calculating, wondering how this woman she voted out could now stand taller than her, brighter than her, and yet carry herself with grace instead of anger. I didn't give her the satisfaction of confrontation yet. I had learned. Silence can be louder than any argument. The gala speeches began. Executives took the stage, awards were handed out, and then it happened. The CEO of the company that had just failed the partnership bid, the one my sister had been pushing for, mentioned my name publicly. For leadership, innovation, and integrity in management, Ellie Stevens has shown exemplary skill and vision. A hush fell over part of the room. Eyes turned. Murmurs began. Recognition. I felt a mix of triumph and relief. It wasn't revenge through cruelty. It was revenge through success, excellence, and undeniable capability. I glanced at my sister. She looked small. She couldn't speak. She had underestimated me.
Perfect.
Daniel took my hand subtly. "Shall we get a drink?" he asked softly. We moved to a quieter corner. Our conversation flowed, effortless and comforting. I spoke of work challenges, professional dreams, and my vision for the next year. He listened intently, nodding, occasionally teasing me gently, making me laugh. For the first time in months, I felt alive, seen, and protected, not by blood or family, but by genuine connection. By the end of the night, I realized something important. Being cast out had allowed me to become the woman I always could have been. The woman my family had feared. The woman who didn't need validation from them. The woman who could stand tall, command respect, and find love on her own terms. The walk back home with Daniel was quiet. Snowflakes had started to fall, dusting the city in white. Each step felt like freedom. Each breath, affirmation. I didn't need my family's approval anymore. I didn't need them to understand me. I only needed to recognize the power I carried, silent, patient, unstoppable. And in that realization, I found a kind of love that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice, trust, and mutual respect. After the gala, things began to shift. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. People who had ignored me for years, colleagues, family acquaintances, even distant relatives, began seeing me differently. Not because I asked for recognition, not because I chased it, but because success, calm confidence, and grace cannot be invisible. At work, my team grew. I started mentoring younger staff, helping them avoid mistakes I had seen too often. Leadership became second nature. Every presentation, every meeting, every project I handled was a silent statement. I am here. I am capable. I am unstoppable. And while the world noticed, my family was scrambling to catch up. One afternoon, my father called. "Ellie," he said carefully, voice unusually soft. We saw the gala coverage. I paused. My coffee cooled in my hand. "I'm glad you saw it," I replied calmly, letting the weight of my composed voice speak louder than words. He cleared his throat. We, his hesitation was a confession. I could hear it. They had underestimated the life I could build without them. "I don't need your approval," I said finally. I never did. There was silence. Then he hung up. Meanwhile, Daniel and I were growing closer. We didn't rush. There were no grand confessions or dramatic declarations. Just dinners, walks, conversations that lasted for hours, and quiet moments that felt like home. One evening, he held my hand across a cafe table. "You're unstoppable," he said simply. I smiled. I had to be. "You don't need anyone to validate that." "I used to," I admitted quietly. "Now I only validate myself." His eyes softened. "That's the real revenge," he whispered. And he was right. I didn't need them to apologize. I didn't need them to beg for me back. My life, rebuilt with care, independence, and love, was the revenge itself. My sister finally reached out again. This time a text message. "Ellie, can we talk? We want to make things right." I stared at it. Months ago, I would have rushed to answer, pleaded for explanations, begged for acceptance. Now, I simply deleted the message. Silence.
Power. Control.
That was my reply, because the woman they tried to erase, she was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone wiser, someone unafraid to say no to toxic ties. At work, my influence expanded. Deals were closed under my supervision. I had a say in strategic decisions. Daniel cheered me on quietly, proud, never in competition, never overshadowing. Our relationship grew. built on mutual respect, trust, and shared values. At home, in my apartment, I decorated slowly, not with flashiness, not with trophies or reminders of what I had achieved, just with light, plants, and objects that reminded me of my strength and independence. And at night, I sometimes sat by the window, watching the city lights, thinking about the life I had carved out, without apology, without compromise. That was when I realized they noticed me now, but it was too late. I had chosen myself first, and that choice, above all, would define my life moving forward. The months that followed were unlike anything I had imagined when my sister's words first hit me at that Thanksgiving table. Every step I took, every decision I made, was deliberate. Every move calculated, not out of vengeance, but out of reclaiming the life they tried to steal from me. Morning rituals, power and simplicity. I began each day with intention. 6 a.m., alarm rings, not as a reminder of obligations, but as a signal of control. 6:15 a.m., meditation, breathing through tension that had been buried for months. 6:45 a.m., a light run, feeling my muscles grow stronger, my stamina building, my body reminding me I was no longer fragile. Breakfast was quick, healthy. Coffee black, strong, the kind that tastes like resolve. I dressed for power, not appearance. Sharp jackets, structured trousers, shoes that clicked authority. Not ostentation, but confidence. By the time I walked into the office, I carried the aura of someone who had survived betrayal and turned it into fuel. Professional mastery. My colleagues began noticing the transformation immediately. The quiet, reliable Ellie of months ago had been replaced with a woman who could lead, negotiate, and command respect without raising her voice. Every project I led was meticulous. I anticipated risks, offered solutions before problems arose, and stayed calm under pressure. I started receiving invitations to key meetings that were once reserved for those with the right name. My ideas shaped company policy. My insight shaped strategy. And as my professional reputation soared, whispers began to circulate. People who had ignored me before now sought my opinion, my guidance, my presence. They were captivated by the woman they had overlooked. Family panic. Meanwhile, my family began to realize the consequences of their vote. At first, subtle signs. A parent casually mentioning my success in a phone call to a relative. A cousin sending a congratulatory text after a press release. But the tension escalated. My sister's texts increased, increasingly desperate, polite yet tinged with envy. Ellie, we think maybe we overreacted. Can we talk? I did not reply. Then, an unannounced visit. My mother knocked on my door, arms full of pastries, pretending casual concern. Ellie, we just want to see you, she said softly. I let her in. I offered tea. I listened. I smiled politely. I did not apologize. I did not justify. I did not beg. By the time she left, she understood, in my calm, controlled demeanor, that I had found power they could not take away. Daniel, the anchor. Through it all, Daniel remained my constant. Not my rescuer, not my savior, but a partner, a mirror, and a safe harbor. He never asked for explanations about my family. He never judged my anger, my quiet victories, or my late-night reflections. He simply celebrated the woman I was becoming. Our dinners became weekly rituals. Long walks in the city, hand in hand, talking about books, ambitions, life, dreams. Slowly, the bond deepened into something neither of us rushed, but both of us relied on. One night, sitting in a dimly lit cafe, he looked at me seriously. You've grown so much, Ellie. I can't imagine anyone capable of stopping you now. I felt warmth, not because of flattery, but because he truly saw me. Strength, flaws, scars, and all. Social recognition. The world outside my family began to recognize me. Articles about young women leading in business featured me. Panels invited me to speak. Awards came with my name on the list. And somewhere in that mix, I noticed my sister's discomfort. My parents guarded conversations. Their subtle attempts to insert themselves into my life, to influence, to control. But by now, I had learned the most powerful form of revenge: nonchalance. The gala revisited. 6 months after the first gala, my company hosted another event, bigger, more public. I arrived with Daniel by my side. He leaned slightly into me, a silent acknowledgement of solidarity. Heads turned. Conversations paused. My parents, present for the first time since my exile, scanned the room. They saw me, poised, confident, radiant. I made a choice in that moment. I would not speak to them.
Not yet.
Not because I sought revenge, but because my silence was stronger than words. They had chosen to undervalue me once. I would not validate their authority again. Self-reflection. Later that night, back in my apartment, I looked at the reflection in my bedroom mirror. The woman staring back wasn't just Ellie Stevens, the quiet, compliant girl I had been. She was Ellie Stevens, independent, respected, unstoppable, and loved by someone who truly valued her. I had been tested, rejected, cast aside, and I had survived,
Thrived.
flourished. The fire that had begun on that Thanksgiving night was now a steady flame, warm, controlled, illuminating every part of my life I had once doubted. And I knew this was only the beginning. The day they came knocking, I was ready. Months had passed since that Thanksgiving vote. Months of building my life brick by brick, of proving myself not only to the world, but to myself. Every late night, every project I led, every quiet moment of triumph had brought me here, to a position of undeniable strength. And now, my family, the same people who had voted me out, were attempting to re-enter my life.
My apartment doorbell rang.
I opened it to find my sister and my mother, carrying perfumed gift bags, smiles carefully arranged. My father hovered behind, nervously clearing his throat. "Ellie," my sister began, we just want to talk." I stepped aside to let them in, the quiet confidence in my body language more powerful than anything I could have said. Daniel, sitting nearby with a book, looked up, sensing the tension. He rose, subtly, offering me a calm presence, a silent reminder that I was no longer alone. The conversation. They tried charm first. Pleasant smiles, apologies that were barely words, questions that sought to measure whether I still needed them. I listened. I nodded. Occasionally, I sipped my coffee. My demeanor was calm, composed, the antithesis of the nervous energy they radiated. "You've changed," my mother said softly. We didn't understand." I leaned back in my chair. "No," I said slowly. You didn't understand. And it's not too late, but it is too late for your expectations. I am not the girl you tried to erase." My sister's eyes flashed, a mix of anger and disbelief. "Ellie, please, you're still family. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I smiled faintly, gentle but firm. Family isn't a vote. Family isn't permission. Family isn't earned through manipulation or fear. Family is chosen. And I've chosen myself first. Silence filled the room. Not the quiet of uncertainty, the quiet of realization. Daniel's presence.
Daniel did not speak.
He didn't need to. His mere presence was enough to communicate that I was protected, respected, and loved. That strength radiated around me. When my sister shifted, attempting a casual insult disguised as concern. "You've changed, Ellie, but maybe too much." Daniel's subtle hand on mine grounded me. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply let them feel the weight of what they had lost. Power without anger. I spoke slowly, each word measured. I don't need apologies. I don't need to reconcile with people who once tried to erase me. What I do need is the life I've built, and the people who truly see me, respect me, and love me for it. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother's eyes were glistening, but no tears fell. They had expected confrontation, anger, desperation, begging. They did not expect calm, measured, unyielding strength. I realized in that moment, power does not always shout. Sometimes it simply exists, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Love in the quiet. After they left, the silence of my apartment felt different. Not lonely, not empty, safe.
Secure. Full.
Daniel took my hand, gently. "You handled that perfectly," he said. I looked at him, a small smile breaking through. "I've learned from the past," I said, "and I'm done being anyone's victim." He nodded, his fingers entwined with mine, grounding me. "I've seen you grow stronger every day," he whispered. "And I love this woman you've become." My heart, so long guarded, fluttered. "I love you too," I admitted. Not because of desperation, not because of fear, but because of choice. Love as freedom, not necessity. The world notices. The next week at work, word of my confrontation leaked. Carefully, professionally, through whispers of admiration, not gossip. My team rallied around me. People who had previously dismissed me now watched with awe. I was no longer invisible. I was a force, a woman unafraid. And in Daniel, I found someone who didn't seek to claim me, but to stand beside me. Reflection. As I looked out at the city skyline from my apartment window that night, I realized something profound. The woman they tried to erase had risen. She had chosen herself. She had built a life they could not control. And in that life, she had found love that was genuine, grounding, and equal. Revenge was no longer about humiliation or anger. Revenge had been this life. My independence, my power, my love. And that was more than they could ever take away. The first thing I realized when you reach the top is this: the world doesn't ask if you belong. It only responds to strength, clarity, and conviction. Months after my family confrontation, I had transformed every aspect of my life, professionally, personally, and emotionally. My company recognized me as a key leader. Board members sought my advice. Competitors respected my strategy. And the press? They called me the woman who rose from nothing. But for me, it wasn't about recognition. It was about proof to myself. Proof that being abandoned, undervalued, and betrayed didn't destroy me. It built me. Public triumph. The corporate conference that month was the perfect stage. Hundreds of industry leaders, media cameras flashing, reporters scribbling notes. The room buzzed with anticipation for a keynote address from someone already famous in the sector, a man with a long track record, a family name that opened doors. Instead, I walked onto the stage. Black blazer, subtle jewelry, confident strides. Every eye turned. The whispers began. "She's the one who took over the expansion project? She's that Ellie Stevens?" I smiled slightly and began to speak. My words were precise, articulate, authoritative. I outlined strategy, vision, and innovation. I spoke not from ego, but from experience, from having survived betrayal, having fought silently, and having transformed pain into power. By the end of the address, the audience erupted in applause. Standing ovation, cameras flashing, social media buzzing. I felt no arrogance, only calm satisfaction. I had arrived on my own terms, the ultimate family comeback. And then, as if fate wanted to test me, my sister's company had arranged a partnership announcement the same day, a public ceremony. My parents attended. Their eyes immediately found me, scanning the room with a mixture of awe and shame. I noticed their glances. I didn't run to meet them. I didn't smile. I didn't seek reconciliation. I let them feel the distance they created. Later, when their CEO attempted to approach me, I met his gaze calmly. No apology, no explanation, no begging, just measured professionalism. They realized, silently, what they had lost. Romance in the spotlight. Daniel, as always, remained beside me. This time, not behind the scenes, but publicly. He clapped the loudest. His hand brushed mine subtly during the ceremony. Not a gesture of possession, but of unity. After the event, we walked the streets in the city, neon lights reflecting on wet pavement, the cold air sharp and bracing. "I'm proud of you," he said, eyes soft and honest. "Not proud that you succeeded," he clarified, "but proud that you never let them define you." I squeezed his hand. I didn't rise for them. I rose for me, and I'm glad you're here. He leaned closer, whispering, I've been here all along, and I'll stay, not to save you, but to stand with you. It was the kind of love that didn't demand change, that didn't demand submission, that simply said, I see you, I respect you, I choose you. And in that moment, under city lights, I realized victory tastes sweeter when shared with someone who sees your full strength, not just your vulnerability. Full empowerment. That night, sitting in my apartment overlooking the skyline, I reflected on my journey. From the Thanksgiving vote that had tried to erase me, to the months of silent struggle and self-reliance, to professional mastery, public recognition, and deep love, I had transformed my pain into a force unstoppable. No one could manipulate me anymore. No one could diminish me. No one could remove me from the life I had intentionally built. The fire that had burned in me for revenge had cooled into something more powerful. Clarity, strength, and peace. I smiled, thinking of my family, thinking of the table I was never allowed to sit at. They had cast me out. They had tried to erase me. And yet, in doing so, they had created the woman I was always meant to be. Looking ahead, Daniel leaned against the window beside me. So, what's next? I took a deep breath, letting the city lights wash over me. Next, I said, is building a life where no one can vote me out again. A life full of love, choice, and freedom. And anyone who doesn't respect that, they're irrelevant. He smiled, pressing a kiss to my temple. I like your style, Ellie. I laughed softly. The city buzzed outside, endless possibilities shimmering in neon reflection. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving, unstoppable, radiant, and entirely free. And Daniel, he wasn't just by my side. He was part of this new life, built not on dependence, but on mutual respect, love, and shared vision. This was the peak of my story, but also the beginning of everything else. It's a strange feeling, standing at the peak of your own life, while watching the people who once tried to erase you finally realize what they lost. I remember that morning clearly. The sun broke through my apartment window in long golden streams, dust motes dancing in the light, a quiet reminder that life moves on, indifferent to our pain. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood at the window, watching the city wake. Traffic below was already buzzing, people rushing to appointments and obligations, completely unaware that, somewhere above them, a woman they once doubted had become unstoppable. And that woman was me. I thought back to the Thanksgiving vote, the cold sharpness of betrayal, the whispered conversations of my parents and sister, their careful planning, their certainty that they could control me. For a long time, I had allowed that moment to define me. But not anymore.
No.
That day, I realized revenge isn't about rage. It's about growth. It's about rising so completely and so unapologetically that those who try to diminish you have no choice but to recognize your power, whether they want to or not. The confrontation. The invitation had come weeks ago, my family attempting a public reconciliation at a private charity event. I walked in, perfectly composed, wearing a tailored deep green gown that complemented my eyes and conveyed confidence. My hair fell in soft waves, subtle jewelry glinting under the lights. I didn't arrive with vengeance in my heart. I arrived with clarity. My parents were there, my sister too. The moment our eyes met, I noticed the tension, barely concealed guilt, a nervous recalibration. They had expected tears, anger, begging. But I was neither. I smiled politely. Hello, I said, letting my voice carry calm authority. It's good to see everyone. They faltered, caught off guard by the calm confidence I radiated. My sister opened her mouth to speak, then paused. I didn't rush. I let the silence speak. The silent power. I realized then that true power doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists, undeniable and magnetic. The room's chatter swirled around me. Guests admired my presence. Colleagues whispered accolades. I caught glimpses of their astonishment. My parents were calculating, realizing in real time that I had surpassed the life they had attempted to control. My sister finally spoke. Ellie, we didn't understand. I tilted my head, a small, knowing smile on my lips. You didn't understand because you never tried to see me. You tried to erase me, and I survived.
Thrived.
Built a life on my own terms. Her mouth opened again, but no words came. Love in the midst of power. Daniel was beside me, quiet but steady. His hand brushed mine in a subtle reminder that I wasn't alone. Not for the first time, I realized how much strength having him near gave me, not because he carried me, but because he chose to walk beside me. Later, when the event ended and we stepped out into the crisp night air, he said softly, "I've watched you rise, Ellie, and I can honestly say, you amaze me every day." I laughed, a soft, relieved sound. I had to rise. For me, not for them. "I know," he whispered, "and I'll always be here. Not to save you, but to stand with you." I smiled, pressing my head against his shoulder. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to fight alone. Love, real love, had finally entered my story, steady, understanding, and unwavering. Reflection. Standing on my balcony later that night, looking out over the city lights, I understood something crucial. The best revenge is a life fully realized. I didn't need my family to acknowledge me. I didn't need them to apologize. I didn't need them to regret. I had everything I had ever wanted. Independence, power, respect, love. And the people who once tried to erase me were now forced to witness it. The fire that had once burned in me, hot, furious, desperate, had matured into something stronger, a calm, unwavering strength. And Daniel, he was there to witness it with me, not overshadowing, not competing. Just presence, just love, just partnership. Closing thought. The woman I was that Thanksgiving day, broken and betrayed, no longer existed. She had been replaced by someone unshakable. And this new woman, confident, unstoppable, loved, would never again allow herself to be diminished. That realization, more than anything else, was my ultimate triumph. I smiled, letting the city lights reflect in my eyes. The journey wasn't over. But now, I was ready for everything. Not because I feared failure, not because I needed validation, but because I finally understood the power of choosing myself and the love I deserved. The final chapter of my journey didn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic confrontations. It arrived quietly, like a tide rolling in, inevitable, powerful, and unstoppable. By the time I stepped into my office that morning, the city below was alive with winter frost reflecting the sun. Snow sparkled on rooftops, the kind of cold that sharpens your senses and clears your mind. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and inhaled deeply. Today was not about anyone else. Today was about the culmination of every choice I had ever made. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of self-doubt had led to this. A life I built, brick by brick, entirely on my terms. Corporate triumph. The office buzzed with anticipation. Our biggest client, one that my family had tried to secure through my sister, was coming in to finalize a multi-million-dollar contract. I had prepared every detail meticulously: financial models, strategic projections, team presentations. Nothing was left to chance. When the client walked in, I greeted them with the calm, assured smile of someone who had faced every challenge and emerged unshaken. My team stood behind me, ready, confident, inspired. The meeting began. Every question was answered. Every doubt was anticipated and addressed with clarity and precision. When numbers were challenged, I didn't flinch. I didn't stumble. I presented solutions, alternatives, and forward-thinking strategies. By the end of the session, the client's decision was unanimous. They signed the contract. My leadership had turned what once could have been a failure into the company's most lucrative deal of the year. And somewhere in the room, my parents' expressions betrayed a mixture of shock and admiration. My sister, now aware of the scale of my achievements, tried to mask her astonishment, but failed. I said nothing. My silence was louder than any words. family confrontation and closure. That evening, they asked to meet privately, hoping for reconciliation. I agreed, not because I sought forgiveness, but because I understood the power of closure. I wanted to define the terms. We sat in my apartment, the warm glow of lamplight casting shadows that mirrored the complicated history between us. Ellie, my mother began, voice trembling. We were wrong. You didn't deserve any of it. You are incredible. I looked at her.
Calm.
Collected. Thank you, I said. But your acknowledgement doesn't change the past. It only clarifies the present. I am still me. Independent, unbroken, unstoppable. My father nodded, swallowing hard. We see that now, and we are proud in our own way. We only wish we had realized it sooner. I smiled faintly. Pride is irrelevant. What matters is respect, and you finally see it. My sister's voice broke slightly. Ellie, can we start over? I shook my head gently. Not over. We can start from here if you respect the boundaries I've set. That is the only way I can be part of this. Otherwise, I walk my own path, and that's fine. There was silence. And in that silence, a mutual understanding was forged, not reconciliation in the conventional sense, but acknowledgement. They had learned that underestimating me came at a cost. The cost of losing influence over a life they could never control again. Daniel and I, love in full bloom. After the family visit, I met Daniel at our favorite quiet rooftop cafe. City lights glimmered like stars reflected in glass. He took my hand, holding it as if he never wanted to let go. You handled that, he whispered, exactly the way you needed to.
Calm. Strong.
Unshakable. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. I realized something today. I murmured, I don't need validation from anyone anymore. And love, real love, doesn't need to rescue me. It just needs to stand beside me. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. That's the Ellie I've always admired. The one who stands tall, who chooses herself, and who allows love to be free. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I felt entirely seen. No masks, no past burdens, no fear. Just us, equal, strong, and intertwined. He kissed me gently, not hurried, not urgent, just deliberate, meaningful, and warm. It was the culmination of months of shared trust, subtle romance, and deep understanding. I realized then that this, more than any revenge or victory, was the triumph that truly mattered. Love that was earned, given freely, and respected. Personal triumph. Later that night, I returned to my apartment. The city lay quiet under the soft glow of streetlights, and I felt a sense of profound peace. I reflected on the journey, from betrayal, to silent suffering, to relentless self-building, to public and private victory. I had transformed every wound into wisdom, every insult into strategy, every isolation into independence. The life I now led was mine. My career, my love, my home, untouched by those who had tried to diminish me. And I realized something important. Revenge had never been about causing them pain. Revenge had been about building a life they could never control, a life they could never diminish, and a love they could never manipulate. The final reflection. Standing on my balcony, Daniel beside me, I looked out at the city I had conquered not through force, but through vision, intelligence, and resilience. I whispered to myself, I am enough. I am unstoppable. I am free. And I was. The woman who once sat silently at a table where she wasn't wanted had now built a kingdom of her own. Thriving, loved, and unshakable. The past was acknowledged. The present was mine. And the future was limitless. Daniel squeezed my hand gently, and I leaned into him. Together, we watched the city, the life we had built, and the power that comes not from revenge alone, but from choosing yourself and loving freely without compromise. For the first time in years, I felt truly, completely victorious. I never imagined that silence could speak so loudly, that the calm I carried, the decisions I made in quiet moments of doubt and fear, would one day echo louder than any shouting, any pleading, any desperate attempt for validation. I stand here now, not in revenge, not in triumph for the sake of pride, but in a space of absolute clarity. The woman I am today is the product of every betrayal, every misstep, and every moment I could have let myself fall. The city stretches beneath me, glittering with 1,000 lights, each reflecting choices, challenges, and